go. Right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 7 of World on the Fly. Just a little bit of calming music to calm you down because we had a lot of intensity in the last episode. We got a lot of information to cover this time about the beginning of the end of humankind. How far back do we have to go to find out why we changed from the way we used to live? Similar to the story that is not only in the Bible, the Garden of Eden story, but most cultures do have a beginning time story. Australian Aborigines have it, South American Indians have beginning time stories of how mankind came into existence. And a lot of them are set in a garden setting, an environment of a jungle. Now, the only thing that most of us know of a jungle, unless you come from Papua New Guinea, South Pacific Islands, or the middle of the Congo, or the Amazon jungle, we don't know much about the jungle. Because we don't live in a jungle. We live in human-defined forms that we build ourselves. Okay, that's enough of that music. Thank you very much. La, la, la. This is World on the Fly. It's a unedited, totally free service, worldwide service of edutainment. That's educational and entertaining a little bit. Don't want to be too entertaining because it's serious subject matter. What are we doing to this only place that people have to live in the entire galaxy? And a lot of you out there advocate that we came from aliens and they came down and planted the seed, and if there's one alien, there could be other aliens, and if we do anything that's going to totally wreck where we're living, we can just get in a spaceship and go off and live into any one of the other infinite planets all over the galaxy. And so it doesn't matter what we do here on this fragile Earth, right? But I think that's wrong. I think this is the center of the universe, and I'm sticking to that until I can be proved otherwise. I need some proof. I don't need science fiction novels and movies and entertainment to try and prove things to me. That's how I am. That's how I roll. It's just how I roll. Now, a lot of you have been putting comments on, and I appreciate the comments, but, it doesn't really matter. But anyway, I'm going to show you a little bit about how it all began. And my contention is that the entirety of Africa, which is where most scientists say all human beings came from, the Rift Valley, somewhere in here, and then spread out. I don't necessarily go along with that. We'll get into that later, where the origin of man actually was. But we started off as hunter-gatherers. Here's a little research that I've prepared earlier, because there's no editing. There's no editing. This is on the fly, and that doesn't mean it's a fly like an insect. It means it happens while it's going. Now, a hunter-gatherer is a human being living in a society in which most or all of the food is obtained by foraging, collecting wild plants and pursuing wild animals. Hunter-gatherer societies stand in contrast to agricultural societies, which rely mainly on domesticated species and, of course, growing stuff. Of course, going back to the globe, if you want to grow stuff, you've got to knock down trees and things that are in the road. And as I showed you in the last episode, when we looked at the section between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, known as the cradle of civilization, every single centimeter along the Euphrates River is cultivated. And you can tell that because as we go in, you can see all the little stripes and the houses dotted around. Because when man became sedentary, he not only agriculturally created all his food by knocking down the natural vegetation and creating his favorite food, but he didn't leave any vegetation to do its own thing. Every single bit of vegetation has to have a purpose, because man's need for agricultural production is infinite, because he had certain ideas about how wonderful he was and what he wanted to do with the earth and his fellow beings. And as we know, that really involves a lot of pushy, shovey, bully stuff that we really haven't got over yet. And that is the basis for agricultural production. It's not really done out of the goodness of one's heart. It's done for monetary gain and for gaining control over one's neighbor and blah, blah, blah. It's not a wonderful thing, which is why in the end, even though it's very ordered, when you look around here in the original place along the Euphrates River, it looks quite ordered and neat and tidy, but it's also surrounded by semi-arid lands and totally uninhabitable lands. It only goes as far as the water can be pumped. And the rest of the area outside there, which I say used to be green and could have very well been full of food-producing trees and shrubs and then animals and all sorts of things, is gone, mate. Gone. It used to be there because the agricultural person puts a lot of work into their endeavor, right? And they want a return for it. And that's what is the basis of civilization. Before there was agricultural production, there was hunter-gatherers, as we just pointed out. Now, hunters began turning to agriculture. No, thank you. No notices. They're always asking, can I have some notices? These little idiots coming out. I've got to turn everything off, you know. Whoops. When you're on the fly, you got a lot of things coming and going. You got to just kind of plow your way through the internet. It's a minefield out there, but you know, we're on the fly and we're edutaining you. Bones unearthed from an ancient mound in Turkey suggest that humans shifted their diet from hunting to herding just over a few centuries. Findings that shed light on the dawn of agriculture. Scientists say agriculture began in the Neolithic period about 11,500 years ago. Right? 11,500 years ago. So there was about 4,000 years between that and the beginning of writing. These symbols that you see up here, I only recently discovered this because of the massively powerful education instrument that I have in front of me called the internet, where every bit of information that you could ever want to know is there if you know where to look for it. And here's what I prepared earlier. You can download that PDF there, whatever that means. That probably lets you look at it later. And this business of writing that I just want to touch on briefly here, I'll get into it later, about the tokens. They made three-dimensional tokens to represent trade as far back as 8,000 years ago. The writing that we have here, there it is there, 8,000, there it is. So clay tokens were units used for goods, accounting goods from 8,000 to 3,500 BC. The three-dimensional tokens were transformed into two-dimensional pictographic signs, and like the former tokens, a pictographic script served exclusively for accounting from 3,500 to 3,000 BC. So for 500 years, they used the signs on top of the three-dimensional token. So I read before, so that this token here represented a jar of oil, this one represented a loaf of bread, etc., etc. And if you got too many of these, they put them in an envelope. This is the envelope here, you see. The tokens went inside the envelope, and then they would pass the envelope on, and then you crack it open and see how many jars of oil and how many loaves of bread you're going to get from the businessman, whoever was trading, because it was used for trading, and this was not considered writing. But you notice here these stamps that they put, these imprints that they put on top of the envelope. They started doing this because, see, this is a triangle here that represents this cone-shaped thing, which represents a jar of oil. So this was the beginning of abstraction. Now, today we live in a totally abstract world. There's hardly anything you can do when you walk down the street today, especially looking at this internet too. This is all abstract. You're not seeing anything real looking at this. It's a good thing I'm talking to you because I'm real, even though it's a recording of my voice. At least it's got some semblance of reality, right? But in those days, everything was real. So that's why they had to make a three-dimensional token to represent the jar of oil. Otherwise, the trader would think, well, what's this? This doesn't mean anything, you know, if it's just a mark on a bit of clay. But they did start putting these marks on the bit of clay. And over time, it took 5,000 years for them to start putting the marks on the clay between the time that they started making the three-dimensional tokens and when they actually put the marks. And they did that so that they didn't have to break the envelope open all the time to find out how many tokens were in there in case they forgot. Okay, so they put the marks on there. And then one bright-eyed guy thought to himself, well, why don't we just put the marks on the clay? We don't need the three-dimensional tokens anymore. But that took 5,000 years to work that. So the two-dimensional mark is a representation of the three-dimensional token, which is a representation of an actual jar of oil. I'm just telling you this because this shows how long it took for people to take their mind away from reality and start building abstract forms, starting with the cutting down of the forest to make a, inverted commas, better environment like a house, which they didn't know was going to need materials forever and ever as the population increased, so they had to cut more and more and more until eventually go to a denuded area like this. They didn't know that. So in the next episode, episode 8, we're going to talk more about writing and how abstract forms and abstract thinking by living an agricultural life and a non-nomadic life started to bring us, let me get a bit of music to finish off. We'll always have to finish with the music, right? Soft music. Don't want to be too excited. Let's relax. Take it easy. Is that the end of the music? On the fly, you never know. Hang on, let's turn that one off. Try another one. Nothing? Nothing? Oh, yeah, well. It's not as good as the tinkly one, but it'll do to finish off. In the next episode, we're going to go in and look at this area here, in the middle of the Algerian desert. You won't believe what you're going to find, but let me tell you, there's not much left. And it all comes from man stepping out of the trees and starting to abstract himself. And the abstract is leading to more abstract. And that's not leading to anything good.